Hey, come here. Come close. I've got some evidence that will blow this whole Vegas Golden Knights cap situation wide open. What they did is completely legal. Yeah, I'm as shocked as you are, but the NHL doesn't have a Mark Stone or a Vegas Golden Knights problem, they have a league issue. LTIR, or Long-Term Injury Reserve, has become the dirtiest abbreviation in hockey. The mere mention of the abbreviation brings up screams of cap circumvention and cheating. LTIR has become known as an infinite money glitch in the eyes of NHL fans, an infinite money glitch that only Vegas and Tampa Bay know how to take advantage of. LTIR is actually a common act and a needed one in a hard cap NHL. When a player is expected to miss at least 10 games in 24 days of the regular season, they're eligible to be placed on LTIR. When placed on LTIR, a team receives a cap credit that goes into their LTIR pool. This allows a team to go over the cap within the amount that is in their pool. Almost every team uses LTIR at one point during the regular season, and that is the result of a capped out NHL. Now, why are people pissed at Vegas for using it? LTIR can be a nice little loophole with both pros and cons. During the NHL playoffs, there is no salary cap. This is because the NHL calculates their cap daily during the regular season. If there was to be a cap in the playoffs, it would require an almost brand new cap system, or we'd have teams end up playing with pretty depleted rosters quickly due to the lack of healthy players, or players would be gutting through major injuries worse than we already have here reported after the playoffs have completed. The short span of the playoffs doesn't allow for the amount of roster juggling that teams do during the regular season to stay compliant. The lack of a cap helps keep teams flexible during the biggest part of the year. Vegas took advantage of the salary cap turning off during the playoffs. After putting Mark Stone on LTIR to facilitate roster-boosting trades at the deadline, the team activated Mark Stone for Game 1 and would be playing with a roster over the cap in the regular season. Stone likely was healthy enough to play prior to the playoffs beginning in the eyes of most. He likely didn't make some miracle recovery in the span of 24 hours before Game 1. He was legitimately hurt at one point, though, to be placed on LTIR. They're given the benefit of the doubt that the timeline could work. There is also the acceptable idea that a player may not feel ready to play in the regular season, but willing to gut it out for the playoffs. Again, NHL players go through a lot in the postseason. The rules on LTIR have yet to change, and that is because every other NHL team knows they could be in the same position one day and want to take advantage of the same rule. Vegas being the only one to do so in such an obvious manner at playoff time this year is what makes them annoying to most hockey fans. But it is not technically against the rules. I also think there is a positive to how Vegas uses LTIR. I like big trades, and they make big trades. Ever since Vegas came into the NHL, they have operated like me playing EA NHL on Christmas morning, making big trades and never caring about the future. Those were the days, so innocent. Didn't have to worry about the housing market or having a mortgage, no COVID, no being on the brink of World War III. Oh my god, how do we go back? We can't. Time just keeps moving on forever, and we just distract ourselves with fun thrills like gaming or hockey trades. Oh yeah, trades. In their short existence, we have seen massive deals from the Vegas Golden Knights. Max Pacioretty, Mark Stone, Alex Martinez, and Jack Eichel. This year was their biggest yet after acquiring Anthony Mantha, Noah Hannafin, and Thomas Hertl at the deadline, thanks to some good help by placing Mark Stone on that dirty abbreviation, LTIR. The NHL has a hard cap outside the LTIR exception mostly. This is why most teams will use LTIR during the regular season. It is hard to make a trade in the modern NHL as each team is pretty much up against the cap or they're entirely tanking. This is a big part of why the NHL sees so little player movement, especially among star players with big contracts. As someone who sat through all 8 hours of this year's trade deadline special, I appreciate a team was willing to get a little bit creative to make something happen. Compare this to the NBA, which has a softer cap and plenty of trade exceptions. Their trade deadline feels much more like a major event and generates a lot more attention and interest. I'm honestly fine with the trade-off that teams might do some dumb cap stuff to create more player movement at this season's midpoint. Now, why doesn't every team do it? LTIR just doesn't have its pros. By doing this move, Vegas was losing Mark Stone for the second half of the season. They lost one of their stars and best two-way forwards in the league. You have to become cap compliant before you can activate a player off LTIR. The trade to acquire Thomas Hertl was also done with the knowledge that Hertl would be missing a majority of the season post-trade deadline as well. The team had dealt with injuries all season. In fact, of their top 10 scorers, only 3 appeared in 75 games or more. You also only needed 27 points to be a top 10 scorer on Vegas this year. So Vegas was in a wildcard spot. They've had injury issues all year. Even with the boost of Mantha and Hannafin coming at the deadline, Why would the club choose to lose Mark Stone for the rest of the season and acquire an injured player in Thomas Hertl, who they knew would not really help them during their playoff race? The playoff race was an illusion, completely made up, fabricated. This is where the issue becomes a league one. Vegas actually improved their point pace post-deadline, but even if Vegas stayed at their previous point percentage after the deadline, they still would have ended up with only about a 3-point negative difference and still made the playoffs. While the Blues and Wild are closer in the standings, being 6 and 11 points off, there was never a lot of pressure that Vegas could miss the playoffs. There were races that were somewhat hyped up, but no actual close race. The league issue is that no one was pushing Vegas, until Nashville got hot with an 18-game point streak after being denied access to the Spear in Las Vegas. The Spear. But up until that streak, there was even less of a threat that Vegas might not grab one of 2 open spots in the wild card. Vegas knew they could go without their best players in the middle of a playoff push because the rest of the Western Conference wasn't good enough. 3 teams failed to hit the 60-point mark compared to the East, where the lowest point total was 66. At the trade deadline, Vegas was only up 6 points on all 4 of Calgary, Seattle, Minnesota, and St. Louis. Calgary and Seattle finished 18 points behind, Minnesota 11 points behind, and again St. Louis 6 points behind. Vegas took away one of the best players in the league and only had to slightly maintain status quo to make the playoffs. All of these teams just had to barely play above .500 pace in point percentage, and they would have tied Vegas at 98 points. None of them did that. That is why I don't believe the NHL has true parity in any way. Vegas played post-deadline with only 6 games from Hertl, 0 from Stone, and lost other key players for a few games like Martinez and Stevenson. They still made it without those key contributors. Look in the Eastern Conference. No one from Washington, Detroit, Pittsburgh, or Philly, or Buffalo could afford to lose a top player at the end. They needed every game. It was an amazing run that ended with Torts dragging down the Detroit Red Wings with him. Which lies the league issue. Vegas can afford to lose players due to the poor quality of the Western Conference. The LTIR issue doesn't exist if a single team came close to Vegas in the wildcard race. The same was true for Tampa when they placed Kucherov in LTIR for an entire season, only for him to come back and dominate in the playoffs. When there is not actual parity in the league, the stronger teams can afford to be without their best players for periods of time. Since over an 82-game season, they'll still make it in the end. The only risk they assume is a tougher round 1 opponent and no home ice advantage to start. But you're also getting back rested stars for those games. Is what Vegas doing annoying? Yes. Do I understand why they and Mark Stone do it? 100%. And every other team or GM would or should at least do the same exact thing if in a position. The issue doesn't even exist if anyone from the group of 4 at the trade deadline played some level of decent hockey down the stretch. The league issue is that there's a gap between the large playoff teams and the not playoff teams. And that is why I believe this is not a Mark Stone or Vegas issue, but an NHL League one.